More on the impact of all of this, let's bring in Andy Lipow. He is the president of Lipow Oil Associates. Andy, it's great to see you. What options does the White House have to ease the pain on consumers here?
Well, their options are quite limited. Probably the biggest option they could do is suspend the federal excise tax on gasoline, which is 18 cents a gallon, and also suspend the federal excise tax on diesel fuel, which is 24 cents a gallon. That would have an immediate impact at the pump. Beyond that, their options are few. We could do a coordinated release of the strategic petroleum reserves, which would add more temporary supply, but it doesn't solve the problem of just getting more oil out of the ground. And we've already seen since July of 2020 a draw out of the SPR of about 74 million barrels.
Right. So we've seen a draw already. We've seen levels at, somewhat of a lower ebb than normal, and this would add to that. The other options we've seen politically floated, at least, would be maybe some kind of gas tax holiday, but that would actually encourage potentially more consumption, or at least not as big a demand response, meaning our demand for crude stays the same or goes higher. What impact would that have?
Well, that would continue to give upward pressure on oil prices. The other thing that the government could do is they could pressure Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, and Kuwait to utilize some of their spare capacity, which is estimated in aggregate to be about 4 million barrels a day, just to simply add more supply to the world oil market. That would have a negative effect on oil prices. And if we should come to an agreement with Iran, that could let loose of over 100 million barrels of crude oil that's in floating storage, and we would ultimately see Iran increase their production by about 1.3 million barrels a day.
Right. It's ironic that in some ways having to warm relations with Iran to get their barrels is one way of offsetting the loss here from the escalation in Russia. What about the options for U.S. drilling, Andy, for the pipeline infrastructure and the rest of it? How quickly, even if there was some imaginary executive order to get things going, how quickly could we see a supply response here?
Well, the pipeline infrastructure is in place. We have more than enough infrastructure to export additional barrels of crude oil. It's just going to take some time to get more oil out of the ground. We've already seen Exxon and Chevron announce they're going to increase their Permian Basin production by 25% and 10% respectively. But these increases are going to occur over the next couple of months. Altogether, we expect that U.S. production is going to increase by 600,000 barrels a day year on year. But once again, it's not a today thing. It's what happens eventually.
And so finally, give us a sense of where prices at the pump are today and where are they headed based on the current trajectory?
Well, today gasoline is about $3.54 and diesel on a national average is $3.96. I expect they're going to rise about 20 to 30 cents a gallon over the next several weeks, especially under today's situation. But one thing that I should point out is we haven't seen a supply disruption as yet. Prices have risen in anticipation of a disruption. And if that is off the table, we can see oil prices fall back.